The frost crept across the window pane in delicate white fingers, turning the warm glow inside into something distant and unreachable. Era pressed her palm against the cold glass and felt the sting travel through her skin, up her arm, settling somewhere deep in her chest. She should have looked away. She should have turned and disappeared into the dark trees behind her. But she couldn't stop watching. Inside, the pack gathered around the long table draped in evergreen boughs and candles. Laughter spilled through the walls, muffled but unmistakable. Someone raised a glass and the others followed, their faces bright with joy she would never share again. The fire in the hearth burned high, casting dancing shadows across familiar faces. Faces that had once smiled at her. Faces that now refused to meet her eyes. If you find yourself feeling what she feels tonight, please subscribe and stay with me for the next story. She pulled her hand back and wrapped her arms around herself. The thin jacket she wore did nothing against the wind. Snow had begun to fall an hour ago, soft and silent, gathering in her hair and on her shoulders. Her boots were soaked through. Her fingers had gone numb. She could barely feel her toes anymore. Behind the window, someone threw back their head and laughed. It might have been Marin, the beta's daughter, or Isla, who used to braid Ara's hair by the fire on cold mornings. It didn't matter now. They were inside. She was not. Christmas Eve. The one night when even the lowest in the pack was welcome to the table. The one night when old grudges were set aside and everyone came home. Everyone except her. Ara's breath fogged the glass. She watched it spread and fade. Her chest ached with something worse than cold. It was the kind of pain that had no cure, no bandage. The kind that settled into your bones and whispered that you deserved this, that you had brought it on yourself. She shifted her weight and winced. The bruises along her ribs throbbed with each breath. Her left eye was still swollen half shut from where Torin had shoved her against the stone wall 3 nights ago. The cut on her lip had finally stopped bleeding, but it split open again every time she tried to speak. Not that there was anyone to speak to. The snow fell heavier now, thick flakes that clung to her eyelashes and melted on her cheeks like tears she refused to shed. She had cried enough. She had begged enough. She had tried to explain, to defend herself, to make them see the truth. But the Alpha had looked at her with eyes like winter stone and told her to leave. Told her she was no longer welcome. Told her she had betrayed them all. Betrayed. The word sat bitter on her tongue. She was the one who had been loyal. She was the one who had tried to protect them. And this was her reward. Cast out into the snow while they feasted and sang and pretended she had never existed. Movement inside caught her attention. The Alpha's brother Torin stepped into view. He moved through the crowd with easy confidence, clapping shoulders and grinning wide. Someone handed him a mug and he drank deeply, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He said something that made the others laugh, something that made them lean in closer, eager for more. Ara's stomach twisted. He looked so at ease, so certain of his place, so utterly untouched by what he had done. She watched him throw an arm around the Alpha's shoulders, watched the Alpha smile and nod, watched them toast together, brothers in blood and trust. Torin caught sight of the window then, his gaze flickering toward the darkness beyond the glass. For a moment, Ara thought he saw her. For a moment, his smile faltered. Then he turned away, and the moment passed. She should go. She should stop torturing herself with this. But her legs wouldn't move. Her body refused to obey. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was something else. Maybe some part of her still hoped that someone would glance out and see her standing there, see her shivering and hurt, and realize they had made a terrible mistake. But no one looked. No one came. The snow piled higher around her boots. Her breath came shallow and sharp. Each inhale burned. Each exhale took more effort than the last. She was so tired. Tired of standing, tired of fighting, tired of trying to prove something no one wanted to believe. Inside, someone started a song. The voices rose together, familiar and warm. A Christmas hymn her mother used to sing. Ara closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her, muffled and distant, but still beautiful. Still home. Except it wasn't home anymore. Home didn't lock you out in the snow. Home didn't turn its back when you needed it most. Home didn't choose a liar's word over your own. Her knees buckled. She caught herself against the window frame, her palms slapping the wood with a dull thud. No one inside noticed. The song continued. The laughter continued. The warmth and light continued without her. She forced herself upright and took a step back. Then another. The window grew smaller. The glow dimmed. The voices faded into the wind and snow. She turned away and faced the forest, dark and endless and waiting. Somewhere behind her the celebration went on. Somewhere behind her, the people she had loved and trusted carried on as though she had never mattered. As though her absence changed nothing. Maybe it didn't. Maybe she had always been disposable. The thought settled over her like the snow, cold and heavy and suffocating. She took one step toward the trees, then another. Her legs shook, her vision blurred. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stand here any longer. Couldn't watch them choose him over her one more time. The wind picked up, howling through the branches and biting at her exposed skin. She pulled the jacket tighter even though it did no good, even though nothing would ever be warm again. Her foot caught on a root hidden beneath the snow. She stumbled and barely caught herself. Pain shot through her ankle. She bit down on her lip to keep from crying out and tasted copper. No one would hear her anyway. No one would care. She limped forward, each step slower than the last. The cabin behind her disappeared into the white storm. The voices faded to nothing. She was alone now, truly alone, the way she should have known she always would be. The forest swallowed her whole. The snow covered her tracks. And the pack celebrated Christmas without a single thought for the girl they had left outside to die. 3 days earlier, Ara had been standing in almost the same spot, but the world had been different then. The sun had still been shining. The snow had been soft and new, dusting the ground in white powder that crunched pleasantly underfoot. She had been warm. She'd been safe. She had still believed that truth mattered. She had been walking back from the river, a bucket of fresh water in each hand, when she heard voices coming from the storage barn. The pack kept their communal supplies there. Food for the winter. Medicine. The funds they had all contributed to over the years. Coins and bills tucked away in a locked chest for emergencies. Ara had thought nothing of it at first. Someone was probably taking inventory before the holiday, making sure they had enough for the feast. But something about the tone of the voices made her slow her steps, made her set the buckets down carefully and move closer. The barn door stood half open. Through the gap, she could see Torin crouched beside the chest. The lock lay on the ground beside him, broken. His hands moved quickly, shoving bills into a canvas sack. He wasn't counting. He wasn't recording. He was taking. Ara's heart had lurched into her throat. She must have made a sound. A gasp, maybe. Or the snow crunched beneath her boot. Whatever it was, Torin's head snapped up, and his eyes locked onto hers through the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Torin stood slowly, the sack dangling from one hand. His expression shifted from surprise to something colder, something calculating. "Ara," he said, his voice smooth and easy. "Didn't hear you coming." She swallowed hard. Her mind raced. "What are you doing?" "Taking what's mine. That's not yours. That's the pack's. That's for all of us." Torin smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Is it?" Funny. I don't remember you contributing much this year. What with your mother passing and all. Hard to earn when you're busy mourning." The words hit like a slap. Ara's mother had died in the spring. The grief had nearly broken her. The pack had told her to take time, to heal. They had promised her that she was still one of them. That family took care of family. "I've been working," she said quietly. "I've been helping in the kitchens, with the children, with the helping isn't earning." Torrin stepped toward her. "But don't worry, I'm not taking it all. Just enough to settle a debt." "You can't. The Alpha would never allow." "The Alpha doesn't need to know." His voice hardened. "And neither does anyone else." Ara backed up a step, then another. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "You're stealing from your own pack." "I'm borrowing. I'll pay it back." "When?" "When I'm ready." "That's not how this works. You can't just—" "Can't I?" He moved closer still, his shadow falling over her. "You gonna stop me, Ara? You gonna run and tell my brother that you saw me with the pack funds?" "Yes." The word came out stronger than she felt. But she meant it. She had to mean it. This was wrong. This was a betrayal of everything the pack stood for. If she stayed silent, she was just as guilty as he was. Torrin studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled again, slow and cold. "Go ahead, tell him. Let's see who he believes. He'll believe the truth." "Will he?" Torrin tilted his head. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're the one who was near the chest. You're the one who needed money. You're the one who's been barely scraping by since your mother died." Ara's blood went cold. "No, I didn't." "Didn't you?" He turned and looked back at the open chest, then at her again. "Funny how I came out here to check on things and found you standing right here. Funny how the lock was already broken when I arrived." "That's a lie. Is it? Or is it just your word against mine?" He stepped past her, the sack slung over his shoulder. "Think carefully before you run to my brother, Ara. Think about what you have to lose." She stood frozen as he walked away, his boots crunching softly in the snow. Her hands shook. Her chest felt too tight. She looked at the broken lock on the ground, at the open chest, at the space where the money should have been. No one would believe her. Torrin was the Alpha's brother. He was trusted. He was family. She was just the girl whose mother had died. The girl who had been struggling. The girl who had nothing and no one left to vouch for her. But she couldn't stay silent. She wouldn't. Ara had gone straight to the Alpha. She had knocked on his door and waited, her whole body trembling, until he opened it and looked down at her with mild surprise. "Ara, what is it?" "I need to speak with you. It's important." He had let her in. Listened as she poured out the story, her words tripping over each other in her desperation to make him understand. She told him about the barn, the broken lock, the sack of money. She told him about Torrin's threat, about the way he had twisted everything to make it look like she was the guilty one. The Alpha's expression had grown darker with every word, but not in the way she had hoped. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "These are serious accusations." "I know, but I saw him. I swear I saw him. And he says you're the one who was stealing." Ara's stomach dropped. "He already talked to you?" "He came to me an hour ago. Told me he caught you at the chest. Told me you ran when he confronted you." "That's not what happened. He's lying." "Why would he lie?" "Because he's the one who took the money." The Alpha's jaw tightened. "My brother has been loyal to this pack his entire life. He has no reason to steal. You, on the other hand." "I didn't take anything. I would never." Your mother's debts didn't die with her, Ara. The words knocked the air from her lungs. She stared at him, unable to speak, unable to breathe. She owed the pack, he continued, his voice flat. Money for medicine, for care in her final months. You inherited that debt. Maybe you thought this was a way to clear it. No. Her voice broke. No, I didn't. I wouldn't. Torin has no debts, no motive. You do. Please, you have to believe me. But she could see it in his eyes. He had already made his choice. He had already decided who to trust. And it wasn't her. You'll leave at first light, he said. Take what's yours and go. If you're still here by dawn, I'll have you removed. You're exiling me? Her voice rose, shrill with panic. For something I didn't do? I'm removing a threat to this pack. Be grateful I'm not doing worse. She had tried to argue, tried to plead. But he turned his back and told her to go, and when she didn't move fast enough, he called for Torin. Torin, who had grabbed her by the arm and dragged her out into the snow. Torin, who had shoved her hard against the stone wall and told her to keep her mouth shut if she knew what was good for her. She had kept her mouth shut. And it hadn't mattered. By nightfall, the whole pack knew. They looked at her with suspicion and disgust. They whispered when she passed. They turned away when she tried to speak. No one asked her side of the story. No one wanted to hear it. By Christmas Eve, she was a ghost. And by now, she was nothing at all. The cold had stopped hurting somewhere in the hours before dawn. That should have worried her, but Ara couldn't remember why. She couldn't remember much of anything except the need to keep moving. One foot in front of the other. One breath after another. Keep going or stop forever. She had left the cabin far behind. Left the forest too, though she couldn't say when. The trees had thinned and the ground had grown rockier, and now there was nothing but white in every direction. White below, white above, white filling her vision until she couldn't tell earth from sky. Her legs gave out without warning. One moment she was walking. The next she was on her knees in the snow, her hands sinking deep, her body folding forward. She tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't hold. Tried to stand, but her legs had turned to water. The wind howled around her. Snow stung her face. She curled onto her side and pulled her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible, as though being small would keep the cold out, as though anything could. She should get up. She knew that. Lying here meant dying here. But the thought felt distant and unimportant. Her body was so heavy. Her mind so slow. Maybe resting for just a moment wouldn't hurt. Maybe closing her eyes for just a breath would give her strength to go on. Just a moment. Just one. The snow covered her like a blanket. The world grew quiet. And Ara let herself sink into the silence, grateful that at least the pain had finally stopped. She didn't hear the footsteps, didn't feel the hands that rolled her onto her back or the voice that spoke her name. Didn't know that someone had found her until the cold suddenly gave way to pressure and movement, and the world lurched sideways. Her eyes fluttered open. She saw sky, saw the dark shape of a man above her, saw his breath fogging the air as he carried her against his chest. She tried to speak, but her jaw wouldn't work. Tried to pull away, but her body refused to obey. The man's grip tightened, not rough, but firm, holding her steady as he walked. "Don't fight," he said. His voice was low and calm. "You're safe now." Safe. The word made no sense. Nothing was safe. Nothing had been safe for days. She wanted to tell him that. wanted to warn him that she was dangerous, that being near her would only bring trouble. But the darkness pulled at her again, and she couldn't hold on. When she woke, she was warm. The realization came slowly, filtering through the fog in her mind. Warm. She was warm. How was she warm? Her eyes opened to soft firelight and wooden walls. She lay on something soft beneath heavy blankets that smelled of pine and smoke. The air was still, quiet, no wind, no snow, just the crackle of flames and the steady warmth seeping into her frozen limbs. She turned her head and pain shot through her neck. She bit back a gasp and forced herself to breathe through it. Slowly, the room came into focus. A small cabin, one room, a stone fireplace against the far wall, a table and 2 chairs, shelves lined with jars and dried herbs, a door closed against the cold outside, and a man sitting in a chair beside the fire watching her. He was broad-shouldered and still, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. Dark hair fell past his collar, streaked with silver at the temples. His face was angular and weathered, the kind of face that had seen years and hardship and learned to carry both without complaint. He wore a simple shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms marked with old scars. When their eyes met, he didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at her with a steady calm that made her chest tighten. "You're awake," he said finally. Ara tried to sit up. Her body screamed in protest, and she fell back against the pillow, gasping. "Don't move yet." His voice held no command, only quiet certainty. "You were near frozen when I found you. Your body needs time." "Where?" Her throat was raw. The word came out as barely a whisper. "My cabin. About 2 miles south of where you collapsed. 2 miles." He had carried her 2 miles. "Why?" she managed. He tilted his head slightly as though the question surprised him. "You were dying. You don't know me." "No, I could be dangerous." "You're not." The certainty in his voice unsettled her. He didn't know what she'd done, didn't know what she'd been accused of, didn't know that helping her might mark him as a fool or worse. "You should have left me," she said. "I don't leave people to die in the snow." "Some people deserve it." His expression didn't change. "Do you?" The question hung in the air between them. Ara's throat tightened. She wanted to say yes, wanted to tell him that the pack had cast her out for a reason, that she must have done something to deserve this. But the lie wouldn't come. "I don't know," she whispered. He stood and moved to the fire, ladling something from a pot that hung over the flames. When he returned, he held a wooden bowl filled with broth. The scent made her stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. "Drink this," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "Slowly." She tried to take the bowl, but her hands shook too badly. He caught her wrist gently, steadying her, then brought the bowl to her lips himself. The broth was warm and rich, filling her mouth with the taste of herbs and meat. She drank in small sips, each one spreading warmth through her chest. When the bowl was empty, he set it aside and settled back into his chair. Ara watched him, waiting for questions, waiting for demands, waiting for him to ask what she had done to end up alone in the snow on Christmas morning. But he said nothing, just sat by the fire and let the silence stretch. "Why aren't you asking?" she said finally. "Asking what?" "Why I was out there, why I'm alone, what I did wrong." He looked at her for a long moment. Do you want to tell me? No. Then I won't ask. The simplicity of it made her eyes burn. She blinked hard and turned her face toward the wall. You should. Everyone else did. I'm not everyone else. You don't know anything about me. I know you were left to freeze, he said quietly. I know someone hurt you. I know you're afraid. He paused. That's enough for now. Ara closed her eyes. Her chest ached with something that had nothing to do with cold or injury. When was the last time someone had looked at her without judgment? When was the last time someone had chosen to help without demanding answers first? She couldn't remember. What's your name? She asked. Veyron. The name settled into the space between them. Strong, solid, real. I'm Ara. I know. Her eyes snapped open. How? You said it when I found you. You were half conscious, but you said your name. His gaze didn't waver. You said it like you were trying to remember you still had one. The truth of it cut deep. She had been trying to remember, trying to hold on to the one thing they hadn't taken from her. Thank you, she whispered, for finding me, for bringing me here. Veyron nodded once. Rest now. We'll talk when you're stronger, she wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him she couldn't stay, that she had to keep moving, that staying anywhere too long would only bring trouble. But her body was so heavy and the fire was so warm, and for the first time in days, she felt something other than fear. She felt safe, and that terrified her more than anything. Her eyes drifted closed. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was the soft crackle of the fire and the steady, quiet breathing of the man who had saved her life. Hash token count budget analysis, asterisk, target, asterisk. 1,400 words approximately equals 1,850 tokens of prose available, asterisk. 200,000 tokens, asterisk, usage estimate, asterisk. Less than 2,000 tokens, proceeding with section 4. When Ara woke again, the light had changed. Softer, grayer. The kind of winter afternoon that felt suspended between day and night, neither one nor the other. She blinked slowly, letting her eyes adjust, and realized the ache in her body had dulled to something bearable, still present, but no longer overwhelming. She was still in the bed, still wrapped in the heavy blankets, but now she could feel her fingers and toes, could turn her head without the sharp stab of pain that had greeted her before. The fire still burned, lower now but steady, and Veyron still sat in the chair beside it, a knife in one hand and a piece of wood in the other. He carved with slow, deliberate movements, shaving thin curls that fell to the floor at his feet. He didn't look up when she stirred, but his voice came quiet and sure. How do you feel? Ara considered the question. Her ribs still throbbed. Her face still felt swollen and tender, but the bone-deep cold that had tried to kill her was gone. Better, she said. A little. Good. He set the knife and wood aside and rose, moving to the fire. He ladled more broth into the bowl and brought it to her. This time, when she reached for it, her hands were steadier. She managed to hold it herself, though he stayed close, watchful. She drank slowly, letting the warmth spread through her chest and belly. It tasted different this time, richer. She could pick out the flavors now. Venison, thyme, something earthy she couldn't name. When she finished, she set the bowl on the small table beside the bed and looked at him properly. He had settled back into his chair, but he hadn't picked up the carving again. He just watched her with that same steady calm, as though he had all the time in the world and nothing better to do than sit with a stranger who had nearly died on his doorstep. How long have I been here? She asked. Since dawn. It's near evening now. A full day. She had lost a full day to sleep and cold and the slow thawing of her body. "You stayed the whole time." "I did. Why?" "You were hypothermic. If you'd gone into shock, you would have needed help." He paused. "And I didn't think you should wake up alone." The kindness of it made her throat tighten. She looked away, blinking hard. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." Silence settled between them again, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt like breathing room, like space to gather herself without the pressure of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. After a moment, Veyron leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The bruises on your face," he said quietly, "and your ribs. Someone hurt you." It wasn't a question, but Ara nodded anyway. "Yes. Recently. 3 days ago." His jaw tightened slightly, the only sign that the answer affected him. "The same person who left you in the snow?" "No." "Yes, I don't know." She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold back the pressure building behind them. "It's complicated." "Most things are." His voice held no judgment, no impatience, just quiet invitation. "You don't have to tell me, but if you want to, I'll listen." Ara dropped her hands and looked at him. Really looked. At the scars on his forearms, at the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into wind and sun, at the stillness in him that felt earned, not given. He wasn't young, he wasn't soft, but there was something in his gaze that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he would understand. "I was part of a pack," she said slowly. "Up north. I lived there my whole life. It was home." "Was?" "They exiled me 3 days ago, told me I was a traitor and that I had to leave before dawn." Her voice cracked on the last word. She swallowed hard and forced herself to keep going. "I didn't do what they said I did, but no one believed me." Veyron's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "What did they accuse you of?" "Stealing. From the pack fund." She laughed bitterly. "I was the one who caught someone stealing." But he twisted it, made it look like I was the guilty one. And when I tried to tell the Alpha the truth, he chose to believe his brother instead of me. His brother was the thief. Yes. Veyron was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's why you were out there. They cast you out and you had nowhere to go." I thought maybe if I just kept walking, I'd find another pack. Or a town. Somewhere I could start over. She looked down at her hands, at the frostbite scars already forming on her fingertips. But the storm came, and I got turned around, and then I couldn't anymore. "So you stopped." "I gave up." The words tasted like ash. "I laid down in the snow, and I let it take me, because I didn't know what else to do." "You survived," Veyron said quietly. "That's not giving up. That's enduring until help came." "You shouldn't have helped. You don't know me. You don't know if I'm telling the truth." "I know enough." "How?" Her voice rose, frustration and confusion tangling together. "How can you just believe me? You don't even know my last name. You don't know anything about my pack or what I did or didn't do. How can you sit there and act like you're sure I'm not lying?" Veyron held her gaze, steady and unwavering. "Because I've been where you are." The words hung in the air between them. Ara stared at him, her breath catching. "What?" "Not the same circumstances, but close enough." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant now, looking at something she couldn't see. "I had a pack once, a good one. I was part of the council, trusted, respected. And then one winter, supplies started going missing. Small things at first, then bigger losses. Someone was taking from the stockpile and covering their tracks. Ara's heart beat faster. What happened? I started investigating, kept notes, watched patterns, and eventually I figured out who it was. His voice was flat now, emotionless. The Alpha's mate. She'd been skimming for months, selling what she took to a neighboring pack to pay off her brother's debts. When I brought the evidence to the Alpha, he didn't want to hear it. He didn't believe you. He believed me. He just didn't care. Veyron's jaw tightened. She was his mate. His chosen. He wasn't going to exile her or punish her. So he made a choice. He burned my evidence and told the pack I was the thief, that I'd been stealing and tried to frame his mate when I got caught. That's... Ara couldn't find the words. That's worse than what happened to me. Betrayal is betrayal. It doesn't matter if it's worse or better. It still cuts the same. He looked at her again, and this time there was something raw in his eyes. Something that understood. They exiled me in front of the whole pack, stripped my rank, told me if I ever came back they'd kill me on sight. How long ago? 5 years. And y'all've been alone since then? Mostly. I built this cabin, hunt and trap enough to get by. Sometimes I trade with a town a day's walk south. But I don't stay anywhere long. Don't get close to anyone. He paused. It's easier that way. Ara's chest ached. Not for herself this time, but for him. For the man who had saved her life, even though his own had been shattered by people who should have protected him. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. I've made peace with it. Have you? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at her for a long moment, then away. Most days. She understood that. Understood the weight of carrying something that never quite healed. The way it sat beneath your ribs and pressed against your lungs, making every breath just a little harder than it should be. Thank you, she said, for telling me. For understanding. Veyron nodded once. Then he rose and moved to the shelves, pulling down a small jar. Let me see your hands. Ara hesitated, then held them out. He knelt beside the bed and opened the jar, revealing a thick salve that smelled of mint and something medicinal. He took her left hand gently, his fingers warm and calloused, and began spreading the salve over her frostbitten fingertips. His touch was careful, methodical. He worked in silence, tending each finger with the same steady attention he seemed to give everything. When he finished with her left hand, he moved to her right, his movements just as slow and deliberate. Ara watched him, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not attraction, exactly, not yet. But recognition, the sense of being seen by someone who knew what it felt like to be cast aside, to be labeled and judged and found wanting by people who should have known better. When he finished, he capped the jar and set it aside. The salve will help with the healing. I'll change it twice a day until the skin starts to recover. You don't have to. I know, he met her eyes. But I'm going to anyway. Ara swallowed hard. Why are you doing this? Really? Veyron was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because no one did it for me. Because when I was exiled, I walked for days before I found shelter. I nearly froze in a ravine 20 miles from here. And when I finally made it to a town, no one would help me. They saw the exile mark and they turned me away. His voice softened. I swore that if I ever had the chance, I'd be different. I'd be the person I needed back then. The exile mark. Ara's hand went to her shoulder, where she knew the brand would be if her pack had followed tradition. They didn't mark me. They just told me to leave. then maybe some part of them knew they were wrong. She wanted to believe that. Wanted to think that somewhere beneath the Alpha's coldness and Torin's lies, there was a shred of doubt, a whisper of guilt. But she couldn't let herself hope for that. Hope hurt too much. Rest more, Veyron said, standing. I'm going to check the traps before dark. I'll be back in an hour. You're leaving me here alone? Do you want me to stay? Ara opened her mouth to say no, to tell him she'd be fine. But the truth slipped out instead. Yes. He studied her face for a moment. Then he nodded and settled back into his chair. Then I'll stay. And he did. The light outside had faded to the deep blue of winter evening by the time Veyron rose from his chair again. He moved to the shelves and began pulling down supplies. Dried meat, a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, carrots and potatoes from a bin near the door. His movements were efficient, practiced, the movements of someone who had made countless meals alone. Ara watched him from the bed, her body still heavy, but her mind clearer now. The warmth and rest had given her back enough strength to think, and with thinking came the slow creep of awareness. It was Christmas. She was in a stranger's cabin, and she had nowhere else to go. You should eat something more substantial, Veyron said, setting a pot of water over the fire. Broth will only take you so far. I don't want to take your food. It's Christmas. He glanced at her over his shoulder. Even exiles are allowed to eat on Christmas. The word sat heavy in the air. Exiles. That's what they both were now. Cast out. Marked by absence and accusation. The unwanted. Ara pushed herself upright slowly, testing her strength. Her ribs protested, but held. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and let her feet touch the cool wooden floor. For a moment she just sat there, breathing through the dizziness that washed over her. Easy, Veyron said, crossing to her side. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could reach for him if she needed to. You've been through a lot. Your body needs time to remember how to work. I can't just lie here forever. No, but you can sit at the table while I cook. That's a start. He offered his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. His grip was warm and solid, his palm rough with calluses. He helped her stand and guided her the few steps to the table, easing her into one of the chairs. Then he returned to the fire and began preparing the meal. Ara watched him work, watched the way he peeled and chopped with quiet efficiency, the way he added herbs without measuring, just knowing by instinct what was needed, the way he moved through the small space like someone who had learned to be comfortable in his solitude. Do you ever miss it? She asked quietly. Your pack? Veyron didn't pause in his chopping. I miss what it was before. I don't miss what it became. That's not the same as saying no. No, he agreed. It's not. She understood that too. She missed the pack she had known as a child, the one where her mother had been alive, and the Alpha had been fair, and Torin had seemed like just another brother. But that pack was gone. Had been gone for years, maybe. She just hadn't seen it until it was too late. What did you do? She asked. After, when you realized you were really alone. He added the vegetables to the pot and stirred slowly. I survived. That's all I could do at first. Found shelter. Found food. Made it through one day and then another. He paused. After a while, surviving turned into living. Built this place. Learned the land. Figured out how to be enough for myself. Does it work? Being enough for yourself? Veyron was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, most days. The same answer he'd given before. Most days. Not all days. Not even every day. Just most. It was the kind of honesty that cut deep because it didn't pretend to be more than it was. I don't know how to do that, Ara said softly. I don't know how to be alone. You don't have to learn tonight. He ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and brought them to the table, setting one in front of her. Tonight, you just have to eat. Tomorrow, you can worry about the rest. Steam rose from the bowl, carrying the scent of meat and herbs, and something warm and nourishing. Ara's stomach clenched with hunger sharp enough to hurt. She picked up the spoon and took a careful bite. The stew was simple but good. Real food. The kind that filled not just your belly, but some deeper emptiness you didn't know you carried. They ate in silence for a while. The fire crackled. The wind whispered against the cabin walls. Outside, the world was dark and cold and endless. But inside, in this small circle of warmth and light, there was something that felt almost like peace. Why did you come out this way? Ara asked eventually. In the storm. You said you found me at dawn. You must have been out there all night. Veyron set his spoon down. I heard wolves. Not the usual hunting calls. Something else. Something that sounded wrong. Wrong how? Desperate. The kind of sound something makes when it's dying. He met her eyes. I thought maybe one had gotten caught in a trap. Or injured in a fall. I went out to check. And you found me instead. And I found you instead. Ara's throat tightened. If you hadn't. If you'd stayed inside, but I didn't. His voice was gentle but firm. I went out. I found you. And now you're here. He picked up his spoon again. That's the only version that matters. She wanted to argue, wanted to say that she didn't deserve to be saved, that he should have used his mercy on something worth saving. But the words wouldn't come, maybe because some part of her, buried deep beneath the shame and grief, still wanted to live, still believed that maybe, just maybe, she was worth the effort of saving. They finished eating in comfortable quiet. When the bowls were empty, Veyron collected them and set them aside to wash later. Then he moved to the shelves again and pulled down a bottle and 2 small cups. What's that? Ara asked. Whiskey. I make it from wild grain I gather in the fall. He poured a small measure into each cup and brought one to her. It's not much, but it's Christmas. Seems right to market somehow. Ara took the cup and looked down at the amber liquid. I haven't celebrated Christmas I can't remember how long. Neither have I. Veyron raised his cup slightly. Maybe that's reason enough to try. She lifted her own cup to mirror his. The glass clinked softly when they touched. Then she drank. The whiskey burned going down, sharp and bright, but it left warmth in its wake. Not the desperate warmth of fighting off cold, but something gentler. Something almost like comfort. Veyron settled back into his chair. Ara stayed at the table, her hands wrapped around the empty cup. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the window. She watched them for a moment, then looked back at him. You said you were exiled for telling the truth, she said. Do you regret it? Telling? He considered the question. I regret that it cost me my home, but I don't regret telling the truth. If I'd stayed quiet, I would have lost something worse than my pack. What? Myself. He met her eyes. I would have become someone who could watch wrong happen and do nothing. Someone who valued safety over honesty. I couldn't live with that person. Even if it meant losing everything? Even then. Ara looked down at her hands, at the salve still glistening on her fingertips, at the scars forming beneath. I wish I could say the same. But part of me wishes I'd never seen torn at that chest. Wishes I'd just walked away and pretended I didn't know. But you didn't. No. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't. Then you're stronger than you think. She laughed, bitter and broken. I'm not strong. Strong people don't end up dying in the snow. Strong people do exactly that, Veyron said quietly, because they refuse to compromise who they are, even when it costs them everything, even when it would be easier to lie. He paused. You could have lied, Ara. You could have stayed silent or agreed with Torin's version. But you chose truth instead. That's not weakness. That's strength. The words settled into her chest, heavy and warm. She wanted to believe them. Wanted to think that maybe her choice had meant something beyond her own suffering. But it was hard. So hard to see value in a decision that had left her with nothing. I don't feel strong, she said. You wouldn't. Not yet. Veyron's voice was gentle. But you will. Give it time. Ara looked at him, really looked, at the scars he carried, at the solitude he'd built around himself, at the way he sat in this small cabin on Christmas night, sharing his food and fire with someone who had nothing to offer in return. Were you alone? She asked. On Christmas, before I came. Yes. Every year since your exile? Yes. The loneliness of it made her chest ache. 5 years of Christmas nights spent in silence. 5 years of meals for one. 5 years of marking the holiday alone because the people who should have stood beside him had chosen a lie instead. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry you've been alone. Don't be. He leaned forward slightly. I chose this. I could have found another pack, could have lied about my past, but I didn't want to pretend to be someone else, just to belong somewhere again. Why not? Because belonging somewhere false is lonelier than being alone. His eyes held hers. At least alone, I know who I am. The truth of it rang through her. She had belonged to her pack her whole life, but in the end, that belonging had been conditional, fragile, built on the assumption that she would never ask them to choose between her and someone more important. Alone, she had nothing. But maybe nothing was better than a lie. Thank you, she said quietly. For tonight, for the food and the fire and the company. I know you didn't have to share any of it. You're welcome. Veyron stood and moved to the fire, adding another log. You should rest soon. Your body still needs healing. Where will you sleep? The chair is fine. You can't sleep in a chair all night. Not after staying up last night to watch over me. I've done worse. That doesn't make it right. Ara pushed herself to her feet, gripping the table for balance. The bed is big enough for 2. We can share. Just to sleep. Nothing else. Veyron looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head gently. You've been through enough. You don't need to worry about where I sleep. I'm not worried. I'm offering. She met his eyes. You saved my life. The least I can do is let you sleep in your own bed. Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked almost like gratitude. All right, he said quietly. Thank you. They settled in slowly, the awkwardness of sharing space with a stranger softened by exhaustion and the quiet understanding that had grown between them. Ara lay on one side of the bed, facing the wall. Veyron lay on the other, his back to hers. The blankets were heavy and warm between them. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire burned low. The snow fell soft outside. And for the first time since her exile, Ara felt something other than fear and grief. She felt the smallest, most fragile seed of hope. And beside her, breathing steady in the dark, was the man who had given it to her. Ara woke to pale morning light filtering through the cabin window. For a moment she lay still, letting herself remember where she was. The warmth of the bed, the weight of the blankets, the steady presence of the man who had slept beside her, careful to keep distance between them even in sleep. She turned her head slowly. Veyron's side of the bed was empty, the blankets pulled neat. She could hear him moving near the fire, the quiet sounds of someone who had learned to move through morning routines without waking anyone. She pushed herself upright, testing her body. The ache in her ribs had dulled to something bearable. Her hands were still tender, but no longer screaming with pain. The cold that had nearly killed her felt like a distant memory now, pushed back by warmth and rest and care. Veyron glanced over as she stood. "How are you feeling?" "Better." She moved to the table, her legs steadier than they'd been the night before. "Much better." He nodded and brought her a cup of something hot. Tea, she realized when she sipped it. Strong and slightly bitter, but warming. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence. Bread and jam. Cold meat from the night before. Simple food that tasted better than it had any right to. When the meal was finished, Veyron cleared the dishes and stood looking out the window for a long moment. Then he turned back to her, his expression careful. "I need to say something," he began, "and I want you to listen before you answer." Ara's chest tightened. Here it came. The moment when he would tell her she'd recovered enough, that it was time for her to move on, that he'd done what he could, and now she had to face the world alone again. "All right," she said quietly. Veyron moved closer, settling into the chair across from her. "You've been through something terrible. Lost your pack. Nearly lost your life. You're healing, but you're not healed. Not yet." She nodded, waiting. "You need somewhere safe to finish that healing," he continued. "Somewhere you don't have to worry about freezing or starving or being hurt again." "I know. I'll figure something out. There's a town south of here, isn't there? You mentioned trading there. Maybe I could." "That's not what I'm offering." Ara stopped, looked at him. Veyron's expression was steady, calm, but there was something else beneath it, something that looked almost like hope. "I have land here," he said. "Not much, but enough. This cabin, the forest around it. I've claimed it as my territory. Small, unaffiliated. Just me." Her heart began to beat faster. "I'm offering you a place here," he said. "Not as a guest, as someone who stays. Someone who belongs." The words landed like a physical weight. Ara stared at him, unable to speak. "There are no strings," Veyron continued. "No expectations beyond what you choose to give. You'd have your own space, your own time. I wouldn't ask anything of you that you didn't offer freely." "Why?" The question came out hoarse. "Why would you do that?" "Because I know what it's like to have nowhere to go, no one to turn to. I know what that does to you." His voice was quiet but firm. "And because in the short time you've been here, this place has felt less empty, less hollow." Ara's throat tightened. "You don't know me. Not really. What if I'm not who you think I am? What if you're exactly who I think you are?" He leaned forward slightly. "Someone who told the truth when it cost her everything. Someone who chose honesty over safety. Someone strong enough to survive alone in a storm, but wise enough to accept help when it came." "I'm broken," she whispered. "So am I." His eyes held hers. Maybe that's exactly why this could work. She wanted to say yes, wanted it so badly it hurt. But fear held her back. Fear that she would bring trouble to his door. Fear that the pack would come looking for her. fear that she would let him down or prove to be the liability they'd accused her of being. "What if they come for me?" she asked. "The pack. What if they decide exile wasn't enough? Then they'll have to go through me first." There was no bravado in his voice, just simple fact. "This is my territory. Anyone who wants to hurt you here will have to answer to me. You'd fight your own kind for someone you barely know? I'd fight for someone who deserves protection." He paused. "And yes, I'd fight for you." The certainty in his voice made something crack open in her chest, something that had been locked tight since the moment the alpha had turned his back on her. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "I don't want to take from you without giving anything back." "Then don't." His expression softened. "Help me with the trap lines when you're strong enough. Learn to hunt this territory. Share the work and the food and the long winter evenings." He paused. "Stay because you want to, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because this is where you choose to be." Ara looked down at her hands, at the salve he'd applied so carefully, at the frostbite scars that would mark her for the rest of her life. She thought about going back, about trying to prove her innocence to people who had already decided she was guilty, about fighting for a place among those who had thrown her away. And she thought about staying, about learning this land and this life, about mornings like this one, quiet and warm, about the man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return except that she choose freely. It wasn't a choice between good and bad. It was a choice between the past and the future, between what she'd lost and what she might find. "I need to know something," she said finally, "and I need you to answer honestly." "All right. Is this—" she struggled to find the words. "Is this just because you're lonely? Because if I stay, and you realize later that you don't actually want someone else here, that you were just trying to be kind." "I'm not just being kind." Veyron's voice was steady. "I am lonely. I won't lie about that. 5 years alone is a long time. But this isn't about filling an empty space with just anyone." He met her eyes. "It's about recognizing something in you that feels right. Like maybe we're meant to help each other heal." "You barely know me," she said again, but this time there was less conviction in it. "I know enough." He paused. "And I'd like the chance to know more, if you'll let me." Ara closed her eyes, breathed in the scent of wood smoke and tea, and the faint pine smell that seemed to cling to everything in the cabin. She thought about the pack celebrating Christmas while she froze outside. Thought about Torin's lies and the alpha's cold dismissal. Thought about walking through the storm with nowhere to go and no one to care if she made it through. And then she thought about waking up warm, about soup offered without questions, about a man who understood exile because he'd lived it, about the way he'd tended her frostbite with such careful attention, about the way he'd shared his own story to make her feel less alone. She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked, at the scars and the silver in his hair, and the quiet strength that had nothing to do with dominance, and everything to do with surviving something that should have broken him. "If I stay," she said slowly, "I need to do it on my terms. I need to know I can leave if I want to, that I'm not trapped here or bound by anything I don't choose." "You can leave any time," Veyron said. "No questions, no arguments. If you wake up tomorrow, or next week, or next year, and decide this isn't where you want to be, you walk out that door and I'll wish you well." "You mean that?" "I do. And you won't expect anything from me that I'm not ready to give." His expression gentled. "Ara, I'm offering you safety and shelter, not demanding anything in return. If all you ever want is a roof over your head and someone to share meals with, that's enough. If you want more someday, we'll figure it out together. But there's no debt here, no obligation beyond basic decency and respect." She studied his face, looking for the lie, looking for the hidden expectation or the catch that would reveal itself later. But all she saw was honesty, the same honesty that had cost him his pack and left him alone for 5 years. I'm afraid, she admitted quietly. I'm afraid of trusting again, afraid of believing someone actually wants me here. Afraid that I'll wake up and find out this was all just pity. It's not pity. Veyron's voice was firm. It's recognition. It's knowing what it feels like to be cast out, and choosing to make sure someone else doesn't have to face that alone. He paused. And maybe it's hope. Hope that two people who've lost everything might be able to build something small and good together. The words settled into her like roots finding soil. Ara took a slow breath. Let it out. And then, quietly, she said, yes. Veyron went still. Yes? Yes, I'll stay. She looked at him, feeling tears prick her eyes but not caring. I'll stay and help with the traps, and learn the land, and see what happens. Something shifted in his expression. Relief. Warmth. Something that looked almost like joy, though carefully contained. Thank you, he said quietly. I should be thanking you. Then we'll call it even. He stood and moved to the fire, his movements careful, as though he didn't quite trust the moment not to break. You'll need warmer clothes, and boots that actually fit. I can trade for those in town. I can't let you. You're part of this territory now, he said, turning back to her. That means what's mine is yours, including supplies. He paused. We take care of each other here. That's how this works. Ara stood slowly, testing her balance. Then she crossed to where he stood by the fire. She was close enough now to see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. I don't know how to do this, she said. I don't know how to start over. Neither did I. His voice was gentle. But I figured it out. And you will too. He paused. We'll figure it out together. She wanted to reach for him. Wanted to close the distance and let herself be held by someone who understood. But it was too soon. Too fragile. So instead, she just nodded and whispered, Together. Veyron smiled. Small and quiet, but real. Together. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, sending light streaming through the window. It caught the ice on the trees and turned the world into something bright and new. Ara stood beside him and looked out at the winter landscape. At the forest that would become familiar. At the land that would become home. Behind her, the pack she'd lost faded into memory. Ahead, uncertain but no longer impossible, lay something she'd thought she'd never have again. A place to belong. Someone to trust. And the quiet, steady hope that maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks that followed felt like learning to walk again. Not physically. Ara's body healed faster than she'd expected, the warmth and regular meals doing their work. But in every other way that mattered. She learned the rhythm of Veyron's days, the early mornings when he checked the trap lines, the afternoons spent splitting wood or mending gear, the quiet evenings by the fire, comfortable silence stretching between them like something alive and gentle. She learned the forest, too, the way the pines grew thicker to the north, the frozen creek that wound through the eastern edge of the territory, the clearing where deer came to dig through snow for the grass beneath. Veyron taught her with patience that never felt condescending, showed her how to set snares and read tracks, how to tell which trees would burn hottest and which would smoke, how to move through winter woods without exhausting herself fighting the cold. And slowly, carefully, she began to teach herself something harder. How to trust again. It started small, accepting the clothes he traded for without arguing, letting him show her how to skin a rabbit without flinching when he moved close, sharing her thoughts at dinner instead of keeping them locked tight inside. But the deeper trust, the kind that required believing she deserved to stay, that this wasn't all some temporary kindness that would end the moment she became inconvenient, that came slower. Some mornings she woke, expecting to find him changed, colder, ready to tell her the experiment had failed and it was time to move on. He never did. Instead, he handed her tea and asked if she wanted to check the northern traps with him. Asked her opinion on whether they needed more firewood or if they could wait another day. Treated her like someone whose presence mattered not because she was useful, but because she was there. And bit by bit, the fear began to loosen its grip. 3 weeks after she'd agreed to stay, Ara woke before dawn to find Veyron already up, standing at the window with his arms crossed. Something in his posture made her chest tighten. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. He didn't turn. Tracks. Fresh ones. Just outside the southern boundary. She crossed to stand beside him. In the pale pre-dawn light, she could just make out the disturbed snow he was looking at. Large paw prints. Wolf. Multiple sets. A pack? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Looks like it. 3, maybe 4 individuals." He glanced at her. Could be passing through. Could be scouts. Scouts for what? That's what I need to find out. He moved to the hooks by the door and began pulling on his heavy coat. "I'm going to follow the trail. See where they went and whether they're still in the area." Ara's pulse quickened. "I'm coming with you." "You don't have to." "I'm coming." She was already reaching for her own coat, the one he'd traded for. "This is my territory too now. That's what you said. That means I help defend it." Veyron studied her for a moment. Then he nodded and pulled a second knife from the shelf, handing it to her handle first. "Stay close, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." They moved through the forest in silence, following the tracks south and then west. The trail was clear in the fresh snow. 4 wolves, moving with purpose but not speed, not hunting, not fleeing, just traveling. After half an hour, the tracks veered toward the frozen creek and then stopped at a small clearing. Veyron held up one hand. Ara froze. He moved forward carefully, scanning the trees. Then he relaxed slightly and gestured for her to join him. In the clearing, the snow was trampled. The wolves had stopped here. Rested, maybe. But there was something else. Marks in the snow that looked deliberate. Intentional. Boundary marks. "They're claiming territory," Ara said quietly. "Or warning us they're nearby." Veyron crouched down, examining the marks more closely. Could be a dispersed pack. Young wolves looking for land of their own. Or it could be someone from my old pack. The words sat heavy between them. Veyron straightened and looked at her. "You think they'd come looking?" "I don't know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Maybe. If Torin decided exile wasn't enough. If he wanted to make sure I couldn't tell anyone what I saw. Then we'll deal with it." His voice was calm. "Certain. But we don't know that's what this is. Not yet." They followed the tracks farther west until they crossed out of the territory entirely, heading toward the mountains. Whatever wolves had passed through were gone now. But the unease remained, settling into Ara's chest like cold water. They walked back in silence. When they reached the cabin, Veyron built up the fire while Ara put water on to boil. Routine tasks that felt like armor against worry. "I need to tell you something," Ara said finally. Veyron looked up from the fire. She took a breath. "If they do come looking, if it is my old pack, I don't want you to fight them for me." His expression hardened slightly. "We've talked about this." I know what you said, but I mean it. She moved closer. I won't let you risk yourself because of my past. If they come, I'll face them. I'll deal with the consequences. But I won't let you get hurt protecting me. You think I'd just stand aside? I think you've already lost one pack because of someone else's lies. I won't let you lose your life for the same reason. Veyron stood slowly, crossed to where she stood by the table. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. You're not just someone else, Ara. You're pack now. My pack. That means I don't stand aside. I'm not asking you to abandon me. I'm asking you not to die for me. And I'm telling you, it's not your choice to make. He held her gaze. If they come, we face them together. Not because I'm trying to be noble. Because that's what pack means. We stand with each other. Tears burned hot behind Ara's eyes. I can't lose this. I can't lose you. Not when I've just found somewhere I belong. Something shifted in Veyron's expression. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he rested his hand against her cheek. His palm was warm and rough and steady. Then we make sure that doesn't happen, he said quietly. We stay alert, we defend what's ours, and we don't let fear make our decisions for us. Ara leaned into his touch despite herself. I'm so tired of being afraid. I know. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, gentle and careful. But you're still here, still standing. That's what matters. She looked up at him, really looked, at the steady calm in his eyes, at the scars that marked him as someone who had survived worse than she could imagine, at the quiet strength that had nothing to do with dominance and everything to do with choosing to keep going when it would have been easier to give up. I don't want to just survive anymore, she whispered. I want to live. Then live. His voice was soft. Right here, right now, with me. The space between them felt charged, electric. Not with heat or urgency, but with something deeper. Something that had been building since the first night he'd offered her soup without asking questions. Ara lifted her hand and placed it over his where it still rested against her cheek. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of wanting this. Of wanting you. The confession felt like jumping off a cliff. Of letting myself have something good when everything I've ever had has been taken away. Veyron's expression gentled. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not taking anything from you that you don't freely give. What if I want to give it? What if I want to stop holding back? Then stop. He leaned closer, his forehead coming to rest against hers. But only if you're sure. Only if it's what you truly want, and not just fear of losing what you have. Ara closed her eyes, felt the warmth of his breath, the solid presence of him, the way he held her like she was something precious, rather than something broken. She thought about the pack that had thrown her away, about Torin's lies and the Alpha's cold dismissal, about dying in the snow because she'd had nowhere else to go. And then she thought about waking warm, about shared meals and quiet evenings, about the way Veyron looked at her like she mattered, like she was worth saving, worth keeping, worth choosing. She opened her eyes. I'm sure. Ara, I'm sure, she said again, stronger now. I want this. I want you. Not because I'm afraid of losing you, because being with you is the first time I've felt safe enough to want anything at all. Veyron pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. What she saw there made her breath catch. Warmth. Desire. But beneath it all, something deeper. Something that looked like the same fragile hope she'd been carrying since she agreed to stay. Then you have me, he said quietly, for as long as you want me. What if I want you for a very long time? A smile ghosted across his face, small and genuine. Then I suppose we'll figure it out as we go. Ara reached up with her free hand and touched his jaw, felt the rough stubble beneath her fingers, the warmth of his skin, the way he leaned into her touch like it was something he'd been waiting for without knowing it. "Thank you," she whispered, "for finding me, for bringing me here, for making me believe I could have this." "You don't need to thank me for that." "Yes, I do." She let her hand slide to the back of his neck. "Because without you, I'd still be lying in the snow. Or worse. And I wouldn't know that it's possible to start over, to build something new from broken pieces." Veyron's hand moved from her cheek to her waist, pulling her closer. Not demanding, just inviting. "We're both broken pieces. Maybe that's why it works. Maybe." He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of question. Not taking, just asking. Ara answered by pressing closer, by letting herself fall into the warmth and safety of his arms, by choosing, for the first time since her exile, to want something just for herself. The kiss deepened slowly, gently. A conversation without words about trust and desire, and the fragile, precious thing growing between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Veyron rested his forehead against hers again. "We should probably eat something," Ara laughed, surprised by the sound. "Probably. And then we figure out what comes next." She smiled up at him. "Together." "Together," he agreed. Outside, the snow began to fall again. But inside the cabin, wrapped in warmth and safety, and the beginning of something that might someday be called love, Ara felt the last of her fear begin to melt away. She'd been cast out, left to die, labeled a traitor by people who should have believed her. But she'd survived. She'd found someone who understood. And she'd chosen to build something new. The old pack faded into memory where it belonged. And in its place, something better, something chosen rather than inherited, took root. Spring would come eventually. The snow would melt. The world would change. But right now, in this moment, Ara had everything she needed. A place to belong, someone to trust, and the quiet, steady knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be.